about tonight. Something that happened about this brain cafe. Well, the wonderful scientists and doctors that came, that answered our request, like Dr. Chang, when we said, can you just come and talk about this? And they said yes. And the wonderful people that approached us about a topic. So tonight, topic on Tourette's, we were approached by a young lady named Sutie Madison who wanted to make a dance with her tics and twitches. And it was an offer we couldn't refuse. Now she's in Philly. She came 2 different times for a week. So it was a very exciting experience. And this is what we came up with this evening. And it's our first time showing it, so we'll be anxious. There'll be questions and answers so you can respond.
Tourette syndrome is not new. The ancient Greeks recorded examples of sudden facial movements, barking, and cursing almost 2,000 years ago. Hundreds of years ago, some people with tics were worshipped and thought to be enchanted. More of them were thought to be mentally ill, tortured, jailed, or burned as witches. Marquis de Dampierre, a noblewoman, a Parisian noblewoman from the 1800s, was a notorious case of the syndrome. All of a sudden, without being able to prevent it, she would interrupt whatever she was saying with bizarre shouts. Shitty fucking pigs! All the more deplorable because of her distinguished manner and intellect, accompanied by shocking criticisms and harsh judgments of those in her presence. It was as embarrassing for her as those she targeted. Dr. Charcot, often referred to as the father of neurology, ran the Salpêtrière Hospital, a Parisian asylum for insane and incurable women. Sigmund Freud and Gilles de la Tourette were students of Charcot's. Charcot eventually would go on to name Tourette syndrome after his students. As part of his educational program, Charcot concocted weekly entertainments. Using hypnotism, he instigated symptoms of hysteria in his patients and put them on display. His Tuesday lectures, as they were called, drew audiences from all over Paris. Authors, doctors, leading actresses and actors, fashionable demi-mondaines, all came with a morbid sense of curiosity. The patients that Charcot put on display were young women who sought in Salpêtrière refuge from lives of unremitting violence, exploitation, and rape. In the asylum, they found greater safety and protection than they had ever known. And for a select group of women who became Charcot's star performers, the asylum offered them something close to fame. The hypnotist abruptly gestures threateningly. Her eyes fill with fear. Her eyelids widen. Pointed out to her, she clasps her hands. As she falls to her knees, she is questioned. What do you see? The Virgin. How does she appear? Her hands are clasped. I thought there was only one Jesus, but there are loads of them. The experimenter simulates a running animal. Laughing, she searches for him. Track and distance from each other as if in a display. Each one playing, each one simulating, and each one losing themselves in simulation. Each one showing the other 100 extraordinary things. It's like a symbolic dance, almost a trance ritual. The couples waltz around a subtle, undefined form.
Good.
Tics were based in neuroses caused by some past trauma or some deeply repressed desires. He developed the talking cure, and for a brief decade, men of science listened to women with a devotion and respect unparalleled before or since. In 1902, after Tourette's death, little work was done on Tourette syndrome. A few patients were referred to hypnotists, but to no avail. It wasn't until the 1960s, with the advancement of understanding of brain chemistry, we put a new perspective on tic disorders.
wasn't totally faking there. And I approached Everett wanting to do, collaborate with them and do a performance that combined dance with my tics, both vocal and motor tics. And just to see what that would look like as to bring a disorder through an art discipline. And this is what we came up with. So, if you guys have any questions for me or
Up in the back here?
Yes. Could you separate the real tics from the fake, what you put on?
well, most of them are from real tics that are mine. But you ask a good question, because when I'm performing, I oftentimes will force them out for the sake of the performance to sort of display them. And I may not do it that many number of times in general, naturally. But those are my tics. This eye one, those are my authentic twitches.
Is there that control? You have that control to be able to make more or less? Or?
It's a very fine line, because Tourette's is so physiological that it's not completely involuntary, like say Parkinson's is. I can control it for a certain degree, a certain amount of time, but eventually the sort of urge, and my brain is sending these messages to my body to do these certain movements in order to feel like I've reached the threshold of satisfaction. And so if that makes any sense, it's like a very fine line between being able to control it and sort of having to eventually just release it.
Like releasing a sneeze?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Over here.
I would imagine when you were younger and realized you had Tourette's, or however that was diagnosed, that it was not something you initially thought of as a good thing or something that you could do creative work with. Can you talk a little about how you realized it was something you could use creatively and as part of your art?
Oh, that wasn't until a few months ago. Most of my life I didn't, think of it that way. It was just very tormenting and sort of difficult to deal with. But it did give me sort of a character, that I guess stood out, and sometimes that could actually surprisingly wasn't a bad thing, to be a little different, and not have to wear cool clothes to do it, But if you want me to answer the second part of your question, which maybe a lot of you are wondering, my idea to incorporate Tourette's into performance piece didn't happen until very recently, when I started doing video art. And that's when I first started to incorporate my twitches into performance pieces, just for the sake of art, just to see what that looked like. And then, shortly after that, is when I decided to ask Everett if they would want to do a full-blown live performance. So it's very recent.
Some of us have probably read Motherless Brooklyn, and in that book, which was a novel, you have to recognize, it talked a little bit about medication versus non-medicating, and I'd like to hear what your experience is and things along that line.
Okay. Well, when I was 13, I was officially diagnosed with Tourette's, and I was put on what's called Haldol, which is a very strong antipsychotic medication. And it didn't really do the trick. It just made me tired. And my mom took notice to that and got me off of it right away, thankfully. I think it would have done more harm than good. And they only really have a couple of medications out that help to maybe suppress some of the urges, but they come with such a slew of side effects that it's often not even worth doing. My own neurologist actually told me that. He said, I'd rather you just, do something else. Drink a little wine. So yeah, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot.
There's nothing.
There are a couple, but they're just not all that effective. It's sort of considered an orphan disorder. They haven't done enough research on it yet to come up with a better medication.
Did you find it? I was
just curious, with your performance art and the kind of physiological release that you get with the reproduction of the movement, do you find that it helps with the tics, or do you think it exacerbates them?
Doing the performance?
Yeah, physiologically, does it help to kind of release the actual physiological need to, or does it exacerbate the urges?
It's a really good question, actually, because as I've been working with these guys doing this dance performance, I'm twitching so much more than I naturally would for the performance and the practicing, the routine of doing it over and over, that I go home and I don't want to twitch at all. It's like I got it all out of my system, you know, and in a weird way, it's like, it's almost like bringing so much awareness into this and like making it so open and saying, look at this, and it can almost be, I can almost sort of make this its own art form or a dance, and being that free with it, and it's actually liberating, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing this, is because there's actually something to, it can be a liberating experience, and it can sort of elevate, thank you, elevate a disability into a sort of an art form. So,
There's a girl over in the back.
What was it like living independently with your diagnosis?
what was it like living in
Independently.
independently?
Yeah.
Who says I have? Well, yes, when I'm all by myself, I guess that's what you mean, and when I don't have all this wonderful support around me, it can be quite tormenting, to be completely honest. You know, it's like anything that you feel enslaved to, trapped by, other types of disorders, anything like along the same lines, neurological disorders like bipolar or, you know, ADD and other things of that nature, anxiety. I have tons of anxiety that couples with it, and it's hard to get through each moment sometimes. So, not always.
Elliot, do you have a question?
One is do you do, I know you're saying like no to medication, but do you do anything naturally like oats, like eating oats or like meditation? And then the second part question was, do you have, I know you're saying like anxiety is kind of coupled with it. I know like OCD, a lot of people with Tourette's have like OCD symptoms too, or do you have other things that are coupled?
Yes, I do have a lot of anxiety. Definitely have OCD to a certain degree. I wish I like lined all my socks up in a row, but that's not my OCD. It's more like thoughts that I get hijacked by thoughts, and I can't, you know, but I'm sure many of us are familiar with some of that. And the first part of the question was, what do I take for it naturally? Well, vitamins, very helpful. Vitamin B is good for stress and also I think your nervous system. And I take lots of vitamins. And I also work out and exercise and dance and do yoga. And the more that I've been working out recently, the more that I have noticed also a decrease in my physical urge and sort of like need, my desperate need to twitch and tic. So exercise has been a wonderful part of that process.
Maybe we'll take one more question from this side, and then.
Have you had an opportunity yet to talk to your neurologist about the effect and the liberation that you have felt as a result of doing this performance with Everett?
I haven't talked to him about Everett, I don't think. I think last time I saw him, I was making video art pieces with my Tourette's. And he said, that's great. And actually, he was such an interesting guy. He was such a neat doctor. Most doctors are like quick to put you on a drug. And I really appreciated this guy because he said, you know what? No. He's like, in a weird way, you know, even though I know that he's like, this is really tough for you, but it's sort of part of your creative it gives you also, it's partly why you're an artist. It makes your art. It gives you that extra jolt of like creative energy, and it's so true. I would have to agree with him. I mean, so he actually sort of would rather that I not be on the medication. He didn't want it to dull my creativeness, my creativity.
Oh, finish with Sarah. Sarah had her hand up.
I just have one other question. Does this interfere with your sleep patterns and things like that?
Tourette's, no, not the actual tics.
Mm-hmm.
They do not. I don't take it in my sleep. I have to be, at least for me, I have to be conscious. I have to be aware, because like I said, it's not completely involuntary, which a lot of people think that it is, and it's really not. As you can see, I can sit here and not do it for a little bit. So no, it does not. But what does affect my sleep is my anxiety. Yeah. So that's.